So here's a little bit about our experiments with Dorodango. It's where you take dirt and make it into fantastic works of art like these that, yes, we actually did make. I roped my sister into trying it with me, so look at the legend in the lower right to see which of our balls each of us did. This is not going to be a tutorial, but I will explain some of what our process was. So first we took dirt from my yard, just regular dirt, and we passed it through a colander type strainer I had, which was somewhat fine, but turns out not quite as fine as we probably needed it. For the first ball or two, we just used one sifting, but later on we decided that probably having a double sifting with more granularity and fineness would be better. So that's what we ended up doing. But even this, we're getting some of the chunks out, and we're getting some of the sticks and twigs and all of that at least out. Now, here's just where we decided later on. You can see in the background we've already made some balls, but here's where we decided to take some of our sifted dirt and pass it through a splatter screen I have, which had a finer mesh, and basically sift it a second time. One of the problems with every project we do is we watch too many different videos and we see too many different ways of doing things, and then we try to figure out what works best. And really the bottom line for these, I think with all of this, is the amount of clay that is actually a natural part of the soil and the dirt that you're using, which is why some people mix in sand, some people mix in what they call clay powder, and some people just have enough clay in the dirt that works fine too. So here we are just sifting for the second time, and hopefully that will make these a little bit better than they were before. Here we're pouring some water into baggies with the dirt that's been sifted, and we will knead it. For the first couple of balls, we just kneaded it until it started getting completely saturated and stuck together, and we could form a ball. Toward the end, we did more precise measurements and followed a tutorial where she kneaded it for 30 minutes to make sure it brought out all the clay properties and it stuck together. There's a lot of variations on how long to do this and what proportions of dirt and water to use, and it again really depends on the quality of the dirt that you're using. But at least the baggie helps keep it somewhat clean and tidy. In our final attempts, we took our twice sifted dirt, had some notes from some videos, and we added bentonite clay powder. We first tried equal amounts, 120 grams each of dirt and clay powder, and then we tried more clay powder, 100 grams of dirt to 140 grams of clay powder with about 50 grams of water. We put it in baggie and we proceeded to knead it for 30 minutes. Here are some progress photos along the way. Notice how it's starting to ball together in the baggie. This is as the clay gets mixed in and the dirt itself brings out some clay properties, which I guess is why you're supposed to knead it for 30 minutes. Pretty soon we're able to start compressing it into a ball, and it's sticking together, and we're pretty able to get a good ball that we can then sit out and let it rest for a little while. And here's sort of how it looked as it was drying. It came up with some huge cracks, which we thought we wouldn't get rid of, but we did. This is going back in time a little, but it's too hard to fix in editing. This is our first attempt at our balls, and here we have got our water and our dirt together to make mud. We've poured it out, and now we're forming with our hands balls of mud, or pretty much just playing in the mud, trying to compress it as much as we can, rolling it around a little bit on our trays so we can try to get it to be as spherical as we can. And these are also the largest balls we made. We later decided these might be a little bit too big because they were quite heavy, actually. We also got to a point which was odd to us and hard to explain, but where we would compress and push, and it would be almost as if the opposite side was pushing out, but it was very spongy and very odd. So clearly there was a different level of dryness to different layers and the core. These were what the balls when we used sand looked like after the initial shaping. We also used some bottles and cups to help form them into balls, which I'll explain a little bit more later, but you can definitely tell how grainy this is. My big one in the back is in a different state. It's been patched, which didn't work real well, but this just illustrates how grainy that sand was, and I think we decided we definitely either used too much sand, which really didn't seem like that much, or just we later decided not to use any sand at all. Here's where we do the initial refinement to patch up some of the tiny little gouges and refine the shape of the sphere if it's not already pretty spherical. Also smooth it out as much as we can. And what we do here is the clay is dried a little bit. It took different amounts of time depending on what concoction of dirt and sand and water we used. But here Beth's using a spice bottle that's glass. Most of the videos use some sort of glass bottle or glass jar that, interestingly enough, if you just sort of roll it around on the ball and have the ball roll around on it, it gently shaves off tiny particles and creates sort of a sludge on the lip of the bottle, which then you'll try to take and fill in any little divots that you might have. You'll see Beth do that in a minute. And this just helps make it completely spherical and smooth, and also, like I said, fills in any little divots, although we did have quite a problem with divots that we just could not fill in. And if the ball gets too hard and too dry, then it's harder and harder to fill in there. She's taken some sludge with her thumb out of the bottle and putting it on the ball. And this was pretty tricky, but also very cool, as it just clearly made the ball nice and round and compact, and started to get toward where we were headed with making it more and more shiny eventually here. So the next step is to refine the polishing, and the videos mostly use the base of an egg cup. So we got a couple of those, and it never hurts to check our notes and basically try to figure out what in the world are we doing. So at this point, there's a mixture of mostly water with a few drops of olive oil in it, and Beth will take a couple of drops of that and put it on the rim of the base of the egg cup and use that to further refine things and smooth the ball even more. You'll see she's dipping it now into the oil and water mixture and using the base, which is the same motion that she was using with the spice bottle, but this just helps make it more compact and round and starts adding that shine. And you don't want to use too much oil or water because then that will obviously turn it back to mud, but you do want to shine it up quite a bit and continue to refine the roundness of it, which is so pretty when it works and so maddening when it doesn't. This is just more of the same movements, but you'll notice how the cup is dragging a little bit more. This means the clay is getting drier and rounder, and you can also see it's starting to develop a bit of a shine. So we know we're getting closer to the next step, and this also is where you have to be a little bit careful not to go too fast and not to gouge the clay, although, like I said, it's getting a little bit harder and about to where we want it. I don't have great videos of this, but we decided this is about the time where you can add color. So here she's adding some green kaolin clay powder and rubbing it on with her hands. There's a variation in shading on the ball, as you can see, depending on if there's some crevices or some little slight divots. Also, if she adds more at one point than another point. We used several colors of kaolin powder, clay powder on our various things, and occasionally some metallic mica powder that I had. But it's real easy to flake off, and sometimes we didn't really like the shiny nature of it. I'll speed this clip up quite a bit, but here you can see we're trying to address some cracks. We had some pretty substantial cracks sometimes. There you can see quite a few. And yet, amazingly, with many of them, we were able to fix them. So what we're doing here is she's submerging, basically. There's too much in the bowl, so she can't, so she's turning it around. But she's completely getting this ball's surface wet with a mixture of water and a few drops of olive oil, and leaving it in a fair amount of time. The interesting thing about these whole Dorodangos is they're just mud. They're just dirt, maybe with a little color, but just dirt. So if they get wet, or for example, you left them out in the rain, then they're just going to return to the mud they came from. So it's amazing, as hard and solid as they become, how actually fragile they are insofar as how easily they could just return to earth. So here she's trying to basically get rid of these cracks and doing the same motions that we did before. She's using the spice bottle to smooth it out, and you can see how the cracks are actually getting compressed together, which is pretty amazing. And also she'll eventually take some little bits of sludge that are forming on the bottle and put them in the cracks. But with a little bit of work, or in some cases a lot of work, it was pretty amazing how most of these cracks sealed up. And also, the more the ball dries from the inside and then moves outward to the edges, it shrinks somewhat, and so it actually brings the crack pieces together and closes it, which is pretty amazing, especially with our very, very first ones that were just plain dirt. They had no clay in them at all. And we had some significant cracks after the first overnight drying, and we thought there would be no way we're ever going to fix these. And actually, our first balls were some of the best that worked out. Here we're just adding some more color on different balls. We're each using a pinkish rose-colored kaolin clay powder. I'm just rubbing it in with my fingertips and putting a little bit of oil or oil and water on the base of the egg cup so I can roll it around on that. Beth has already done most of that, so now she's using her thumbs to press the color more into the clay, and that helps with shininess too. The idea here is to alternate between your hands and the egg cup, and I'm rolling mine around with the egg cup stationary on the table, and to do this slowly and to rotate the egg cup underneath as well as the ball on top to get all sides and all areas of it, basically. The oil only helps it move smoothly, so it just helps compress the color into the ball. And this particular color was quite vivid on our hands, but it washed up pretty easily. And you'll see the finished product in later pictures. So this was our experiment with that. And as far as the clay powder actually goes, most of the videos that called for it just called it clay powder, so we had no idea what that was. But when searching for that on Amazon, the bulk of the clay powder, well, pretty much everything we found, was either bentonite or kaolin, and it was used for soap making, I believe, and or facial masks. So apparently all of this could be used for a facial mask. And some of them had different properties that helped with moisturizing, helped with acne, helped with, I don't know, a variety of other things. But I think for our purposes, this is probably the best we could do. And usually worked pretty well. Here I'm adding some blue with my fingers onto the red, and it'll make a nice combination of colors. The drier the ball gets, the more the colors get absorbed, though, and they get dulled. But then shining them, like Beth's doing right now, against the egg cup will help make it shiny and bring out those colors. So I may speed this up a little bit, but we'll see. I didn't have any footage of this step, so I borrowed something from Sarah's Happy Place. This woman and her son are just using dirt, the same dirt that made the original ball, and they're sprinkling it on a very thin layer and then rubbing it in until the moisture of the ball actually absorbs it, and this helps shine it and polish it and adds ever so slightly a layer. We did this on our first balls with the dirt, and on, I think, our other balls, some of them with dirt and sand, and then toward the end we were using just the clay powder. But you have to be careful because, as you'll see later on, too much clay powder and too thick of a slurry did not work well at all. Here's just a quick look at the kaolin and bentonite powders we used, as well as the Pearl X mica that we used on some of the balls. And here are our final masterpieces. These are Beth's. She certainly achieved some beautiful shine, some great roundness, and these are the same ones, just in a slightly different light. The one at the left was the first one done and one of our favorites. Here are mine, and they're having some issues with roundness. They show better at some angles, but this really did not capture them. I don't know why I was so challenged. But they turned out fairly well. And actually the deep blue one on the far right and the one next to it were actually some of the prettiest, but then time took its toll. Here's my first one where I put quite a bit of mica powder, and it did not end up staying like that exactly. Beth here is applying some mica powder on her first one. And the rest of these photos are just our balls in various stages. I'm sorry they may or may not be in order. We took a lot of pictures along the way just because we wanted to see if things like this with cracks would repair themselves, how the colors would stand up, how it looked without any kind of color or mica at all. And some of these, this is Beth's, which is just really, really gorgeous. I think, can't remember. I was going to say, I think that might have been one of the later ones. This is Beth's, and I think it's natural, the natural soil. I don't think it has any coloring at all on it, just in a little bit different light. But look how beautiful and round that is. Only a few tiny little surface imperfections, but really a very pretty one, and it looks much prettier in person. You know how photographs are, they pick out every single little thing. She even tried to do a few repairs on this, and we had some success with repairs and not so much success with others. This is one of mine that was one of my favorites, though it changed over time, and I was having some issue with some divots that were chunking out, and some cracks and a variety of things. This is before it got very polished, but it was hard polishing it where there were chunks that were coming out like that. And then this green one is one of Beth's. In early stages, we were not sure she was going to be able to fix those cracks, but she did. And this just shows how almost nothing is unfixable. We had a variety of success with some of these, lots of different ways to do it. Mostly, I think with this one, she had to completely resubmerge it and basically start over from the core. But it ended up being really, really pretty. And then this is one of mine. I think it's the one I showed a little bit earlier in a different stage. I used probably some silver mica and some light blue kaolin. This was one of my prettiest. This was before it got shined up very much. It had a lot of cracks and chunks that I was able to repair, but you'll see in a photo near the end that over time they undid themselves. And sort of same thing with this one, though it is obviously not round. It was one of the pretty ones that I did. It was a combination of some copper mica powder and probably the actual dirt color. There, it looks round from that angle. You can also see, though, where some of the mica was chunking out, and had a hard time with it, but it did look pretty for a moment. That's Beth's. Don't know why it's in this order. Here's just more of mine, and I think it might have been one of Beth's. This was an early stage, I think, of one of mine, but I ended up having to redo it, and I think here it and the one behind it are just in different stages of changing. This was my very big one. I tried working on the shine and it was too metallic. Here's the ones we just have covered in some powder. This one is one of Beth's original, which is really, really nice. Here's just some of Beth's in various stages. You can see one in the bottom that's sort of flaking. Here are a couple of mine as they're resting, my big one and a couple of my other ones. And now we have another picture of Beth's. She really came out with the best ones. Unfortunately, one of her prettiest ones is this one, and it started cracking a lot. And we left it, and she was going to see about fixing it. I think she had added a layer of slurry, but in the end you can see right here what happened, and it was a disaster, which is too bad. This was one of my prettiest. There are some divots and some scratches, but I did get quite a bit of shine on it and a nice deep blue, and it was very pretty. Even with its imperfections, it was okay for a while. You could see some cracks and some divots, but unfortunately time did not do it well at all. I'll show you at the very end, but it was pretty for a while. And so is this sort of copperish one. It's not round, but and it's not real shiny here either, but it ended up being really shiny and very, very pretty until it had some time to do the best of it. Here's one of our green ones, probably Beth's, probably some that she had to redo to fix the cracks. I tried green at one point too, so it may have been mine. I don't quite remember, but it was pretty where it wasn't cracked. And then here we have just a few more of mine that are in various states. This was the lighter one I did, or maybe this is Beth's because it's awfully round to be one of mine. I don't actually remember right now. We didn't set out to do exactly the same color schemes, but so many of ours we had to redo, and they changed over time, and in the end, more of them looked alike or sort of alike than we anticipated. So that's sort of why it's difficult now to tell them apart, some of them. Although the rounder they are, the probably more likely they are that they're Beth's. I don't know why I had such an issue with that on some. And I think that one's mine. I'm not sure. Pretty sure this one, I was going to say it's Beth's, but Beth's doesn't have that many divots in it. I liked the color. With the divots, though, it's hard to polish because the cup doesn't touch those low spots, and it's hard to get them polished. Too much pressure has them chunking off, so clearly there's something wrong with the mix. I think this one probably had sand in the original. And here's some more of my dark blue one in various stages. I think these were probably taken a little earlier. In spite of the places where it was chunking out, it really was quite pretty. Although there it shows how completely not round it is. And where those cracks were, unfortunately, it got worse over time, which I'll show you in a minute. But parts of it were really, really pretty. And it had some work that needed to be done. I tried a few repairs. Some were not very successful. But there comes a time, too, when you just sort of decide to give up on it. And this was one that was one of our favorites along the way. It was mine. It had some pink and blue and possibly some silver mica, some blue mica maybe. It's hard to tell because so much of the color gets absorbed into the clay. But it had its it had its nice spots, I suppose. Some of the flaws definitely show up more on camera. This was probably Beth's because it's round and it's shiny. Did have a few cracks that she was able to work on. Not sure what stage it is. It was probably early on. It may have been one that cracked even more and then she was able to repair. But look how round that is and how shiny and pretty. Now we're coming up to a picture of one of mine that was kind of pretty when I finished it, but see how the color changed after a few days. It completely lost all of the color. I did a little repolishing and it brought back some, but nowhere near as much as it was originally there. And this one is sad. This was my deep, dark, beautiful blue one. It never was very round, but look at what the cracks and the bulges have become like over time. It's also lost some of its brilliance and some of its deep blue. That tends to happen over time, and they say you can just repolish and it'll bring that back, but I tried repolishing and more of it chunked out. But the really amazing thing is just how distorted even more now it's become. So, was it worth it? That's debatable. Actually, we're glad we tried it. We're glad we tried several ways to do it. We learned a lot. We never did achieve the Zen and meditative state that one is supposed to doing these things. And in the end, they didn't turn out as nicely as they should have for as much time as we spent. But it was something new to try, and we did have some success.